Hey everybody, it's Leeroy from Leeroy Gaming, and in today's Warhammer 40k Rogue Trader video, we're going to be reviewing companions. And I'm going to be reviewing the very first 5 companions that you get access to in the game, and then I'm going to be doing a second video coming up shortly that will do the other 5. Now, I do want to point out a couple of rules on my review process. What I'm going to be looking at is first, I will be resetting the characters to minimum level that is allowed, and going over their unique features. So the different companions do have unique elements that other characters, if they were to be spec'd the same way, meaning the same archetypes, would not have, making them unique. I will also show you a higher level version of the character to kind of show you an example way of how the character builds out, as well as my feedback on how I feel they perform compared to some of the other companions. Now, do note there is an element of subjectivity here as well. I'm not factoring in romance compatibility, for example, because everybody has different taste, and you may bring a character that maybe in combat is less optimal just because you like their story or you want to romance them or whatever it may be, and they become part of your party because of that. We will be pointing out their various convictions, because again, some people may want to have a team that's dogmatic or heretical or iconoclast focused, or maybe wants to avoid certain characters. So I'm going to have that as part of my feedback. But as far as reviewing the power of each character and companion, I'm going to be trying to focus on their effectiveness in combat overall. We'll definitely love to hear your feedback if you agree or disagree in the comments below. As always, if you find this video helpful, please make sure to drop a like, share this with your friends. If you want to help me get this to more people, please drop a comment. Let me know if you have any questions about the classes and the companions. I'll do my best to read those and answer them to the best of my ability. That being said, guys, let's go ahead and take a look at the very first 5 companions that you are likely to meet in Warhammer 40k Rogue Trader. All right, guys, we're going to go ahead and begin the review process by looking at Argenta, a real crowd favorite during the beta from players. She's a dogmatic character, and resetting her levels, she is a soldier, so really meant to be a ranged fighter. Now, as far as unique features that she gets from her initial setup, when it comes to origin talents, she starts out with Bolter and Flamer proficiency, so you could easily be kind of pushed into utilizing those. And she also gets Field Medic, which is unique. Normally it says allows the warrior to use medkits without the Medicae skill. Also, warriors gain additional +4 wounds whenever a medkit is used. Now again, this is unique because remember, she is a soldier, not a warrior class. So that's something to keep in mind. Also, she starts with power armor proficiency. You do not get access to power armor till way later in the game. With that being said, you will see later in this review, she's really meant to be a medium armor character because of one of the unique talent options she's going to get that will allow you to use medium armor without getting any penalty to your dodge. So you can get all the armor benefit while still being extremely agile. We'll talk about that as well. She has a Death World background, which is normal and standard. Starts with Survival Instinct. And also, she's a Ministorum Priest. This is going to allow her to be very defensive, not only against physical damage through armor, not only dodging through being agile, but also anti-psyker damage, for example. Additionally, she does get 2 buffs if she's in a flagship post. She gets Lance Reload. So Expeditious Reload will also reload the Prow Lance weapon. So normally this only reloads certain type of weapons that are kind of on that shoot from the side. But here, however, the weapon will suffer -25% extra penalty to hit chance when shooting. And also she gets Shortcut, so new heading cooldown is reduced by -1 round. Now, baseline, if we look at their stats, how she is started out, and this can give you hints to how the game kind of wants you to build her. Do remember that characteristics start with a base of 30. So she gets nice boost to ballistic, to toughness, an extra large boost to agility, which again, even though she's kind of an armored fighter, you can really tell that they want her to be also quite agile. She's not very intelligent. She's also does not have very good fellowship, but she has a slight boost to willpower, and perception is also good for helping you not only be able to find traps, for example, but also combo well with her being kind of your demolition expert based on her high agility. So finding and then disarming traps is a really good natural role for her. Now she's going to get the starting talents of run and gun, which is a really big benefit early in the game. You're able to be very mobile and attack twice around, which is not something you can do very easily with most of the archetypes. And Warham is also a really good way of buffing your momentum. And if you don't know what momentum is, think of it as kind of morale. And if you get high morale, you're able to use your heroic powers, your superpowers. So this allows you to boost that up quite a bit. Now, I will say, as an overall review of combat performance of Argenta in low to mid levels, she's actually going to be quite efficient early on. She's going to be able to move around a lot. She can hit multiple targets potentially if you pick an AoE weapon, or if you boost your ballistic skills and use your burst ability. So early on in the game, she's going to be quite strong. Now, I will point out that as you level up higher, she is likely to struggle to compete versus single target damage compared to snipers. And she's also going to struggle comparing an AoE damage compared to Psychers, for example, if you do build an AoE-based Psyker. And her biggest problem is later on in the game, you're going to see this in the next video, she's got a big brother of sort of characters that really eclipses her in almost every single way. So later on in the game, she may just be simply outclassed by a character that we will be discussing in the next video. Alright guys, now we'll go ahead and take a look at Argenta at level 35. And for reference, this is the level where you max out your second archetype right before you unlock your exemplar. So this is a good level to kind of see your potential heading into Act 4 roughly. Now there's many different ways to build Argenta, but as I mentioned at the beginning, I want to lean into kind of her unique strengths. So we're going to be having actually really good agility. We're buffing her ballista skill some, but I do want to point out that her Arc Militant archetype and versatility specialty, which I'll discuss it in a second, is going to help get that ballista skill really, really high, so you don't have to lean into it fully. We are also going to have decent willpower, 55. If we can get that a little higher, that'd be quite good as well. The big skill that we are focusing on is demolition for her. And she's also going to have decent awareness, mainly to be able to identify the different traps. Now, I'm going to go over a specific feature that makes us so she cannot get any lower warp or lower Xenos. That's what you're going to see, this minus 175. So let's take a look at those features. Now, I want to say right off the bat, the biggest thing that's going to help her out early leveling up is second skin. So the soldier's medium armor does not reduce dodge. So you'll notice I have really good medium armor. I'll show you that in the inventory section as a bit of an example of what I have right now. But she also has 95% dodge. So she's very, very versatile in that way because of that. Now, a big thing for her is going to be kind of being in cover all the time, at least light cover. So Fortress is going to buff you up when you are in full cover. As far as buffing your special ability, your heroic action, we want to go ahead and get the upgrade that until the end of combat, all your soldiers' attacks are 20% harder to dodge and 10% better armor penetration. And also end of combat, you get rate of fire increased by 30%, really leaning into rapid fire getting as many shots as possible of that. We're also going to want to be able to get high critical hit chance. So when you get a lot of these little shots off, you want to crit for that double damage as much as possible to get more kills off on smaller, weaker targets, especially, so you can proc Revel into Slaughter. Now, as far as origin upgrades, this is really, really big for the character. Picking up some of these, the Emperor Protects is going to increase just having a chance to ignore all damage. Shield of Faith is going to give you much higher armor against demon and warp damage. Also going to increase your resolve. And this is based off your willpower. So if other characters in combat buff your willpower, both of those are going to go quite a bit higher. No Heresy is also big. This is what makes it so you cannot have Lore Xenos or Lore Warp, but it's going to give you better crit chance and armor against Xenos and demonic creatures. So you're, again, really leaning into being really tanky against these enemies of mankind. You will also be using a combination of bolters and heavy weapons depending on what you're fighting. So overpower is really big on increasing crit chance and also increasing critical damage. And then a big thing that I always recommend for characters that specialize in specific skill is getting the advanced skill for them. So not only does it give it a nice boost, but lets you reroll failed skill tests. So this is going to be kind of her specialty. Now, to give you an idea of how you can equip her, again, she's not part of my active party in the current playthrough, but I did put together some armor and items for her. This really high medium armor gives her a buff to her perception. That's how she has 55 perception, but also huge armor, and she doesn't get that dodge penalty. Because she's dogmatic, she can take advantage of this helmet that makes her immune to critical hits, again, making her more tanky. I've got a neck piece on her that will make her automatically hit. And then two different weapons, both a multi-rate of fire bolter for the burst fire options, and then for your AoE attacks especially, would be a nice multi-weapon for dealing with AoE situations and also dealing with creatures that have high armor penetration. So this kind of setup is going to make her, again, she's not going to be the best at single target or AoE, but she's going to be mobile. She's going to be very, very defensive against all types of enemies. So overall, not a real min-max character, but one that can be versatile in many different situations. All right, guys, next we're going to go ahead and look at Idira. And she's going to be your only heretical option early game. She is an unsanctioned psyker. And here she is rolled back to her beginning state. She starts as an operative. Now it says she's good at using intelligence and perception. I would say that you can lean really heavily into willpower and then perception for kind of the damage boosts. You don't necessarily need to lean into intelligence unless you need to make her your kind of skill monkey or intelligence skill monkey, but I think that's a bit of a waste on her. Analyze enemies is a very powerful ability. You're going to be able to stack these exploits on an enemy, and the big thing here is the more stacks you have, the more percentage damage boost you will do on a hit. So she's quite good at building stacks of analyze enemies if you want to, and then doing one big attack on an enemy with one of her psychic attacks, like Psychic Scream, for example. Now, as far as her origin talents that make her unique, she is an unsanctioned psyker. She's the only unsanctioned psyker you have access to. You yourself, when you become a psyker, are a sanctioned psyker. For her, the big difference is she does trigger negative effects potentially more often, like the perils of the warp. But what she gets as a trade-off is her psych rating is one level higher than baseline. And what you basically need to know is psychic ratings go 1, 2, 3, 4. So she is basically 2, 3, 4, 5. And that means that all of her psychic like offensive abilities and debuffs are going to be more powerful and more useful. But she has a higher chance of negative things proccing. Do note, if you go down a heretical pathway, there are basically talents you can choose that will make it that you can turn those negative effects into positive effects. But you have to really spec into that. Now, baseline, she does get both access to divination and she gets forewarning, which is very powerful. Increases dodge and parry, and this does scale off your willpower. And then telepathy, which is mind altering effects, including her offensive attacks like Psychic's Shriek, which can be very powerful as it does scale off willpower. And if you build her and buff her properly, doing attacks against enemies that have stacks of exploits on them can basically just blow people up single target. But with that being said, that's not even the limits of her power, because even at level 1, you're going to get a great charge staff, which basically gives you arc lightning. And even early in the game, she's going to be very good at defeating packs of 2, 3, 4 enemies that are close together. Be careful though, because the arc lightning can chain to yourself or other allies. So you have to be very tactical with her, but she can be amazing at clearing AoE groups, as well as being quite effective at doing big blast single target damage. And then her flagship post ability is High Tide, increases damage of Warp Wave by 10%. Exact Prediction is great. Your Arc Augury gains +1 range and lasts for 2 weapon attacks instead of 1. So I will tell you from my experience early on, she's going to be very, very versatile if you end up using her. I know she's not as popular, but she will only grow in power. With that being said, let's take a look at her when she powers up to level 35. All right, now let's go ahead and review Idira around level 35. I have her level 36 here, but the big thing here I will point out, I made her as a bounty hunter, so she can be really good at focusing, 1 to 3 enemies or so, prioritizing targets, and still having her good AoE. But you can build her as an assassin, for example, or in any other ways. But the way I've built her has made her really, really good at AoE killing, and also very strong single target damage with psychic abilities. You'll notice I really lean into willpower and perception with her, and she's my lower warp master on this character. I have items that debuff her weapon skill and ballistic skill, but that's not the end of the world the way that I built her. You can build her to have high ballistic skills, because there are features and talents that allow you to get bonuses to your damage, even with your staffs and psychic abilities, if you have high ballistic, but I chose not to do that on this effect. I will point out that I actually find that the heroic ability for the operative is quite weak in my opinion, so I'm not a big fan of it. Here's what it is. There's just better uses of it on some of the other classes. And Wild Hunt's okay. You're able to make it to where you buff it so it does basically 300% extra damage to if you target only one person with Wild Hunt. But again, I find it a bit lacking. Hunt down the prey is really where things are at. You're going to be putting this for free on up to 3 enemies baseline. And then as you kill them, you're going to get a variety of bonuses. Because I do recommend leaning into perception and willpower, really buffing your ability to get first big hits with fresh target. Uncanny Sight lets you spread exploits all around. Perfect Spot, I mainly use it to make it so that you're more defensive and cover and have better perception. Offensive Patterning is pretty nice because you can take less damage from enemies that have exploits on them. And then also Combat Insight is going to give you extra AP, and you can ignore enemies' deflection once you can get perception to a bonus or 10 or higher. Now, with all psychers, I always recommend Stabilizing Factor because it does keep your Veil Degradation from going too crazy. Again, she's the Warp Specialist, so I recommend getting the lower warp of her. Second Sight is going to make it so your psychic powers have really long range, which is amazing. And I also recommend picking up Pyromancy with her because there's some great abilities like Blazing Inferno that's going to increase crit chance, for example. melting armor to get from there as well. So you're just really good at removing armor and deflection from enemies. Now, when it comes to equipping Idira, I recommend anything that's going to increase willpower, psychic damage, obviously. So dark vision hood is great. They can wear medium armor. Then, because she is the lore warp specialist, any support items that will increase lore warp, like this one here, or this item here, that gives an additional 20. Because she is heretical, you can get special neck pieces that will give her extra health and regen because she's heretical, or you can get an item like this, which will basically make her more powerful the higher the veil degradation is. And again, that's that bar that increases as you cast more spells. Here's gloves, warp conduct gloves that will make her more powerful whenever you trigger psychic phenomena, which is and perils of the warp. And then you can get any cloak that's going to increase your defenses, for example. Same idea here, upping your dodge is a good tactic. Now again, at level 35 for me, she is one of my 2 main damage dealers. I have her and I have a sniper character. And between them, they can, in one turn, wipe out an entire encounter. More often than not, she handles AoE clusters, and my sniper handles my single targets or spread out enemies. So she can be very, very effective in any party. Of course, if you're going to go down a heretical pathway, you can min-max her effects even more. All right, next we have Abelard, which is going to be the first character that joins you. He is an iconoclast, and this character right off the bat at early level is going to be your warrior. He's going to be your tank. Now he's very, very simple at the beginning. He's going to have multi-weapon proficiency. He's going to have field medic. And then for the most part, nothing really that special. He is a Navy officer, which really synergizes well with being a tanky support character. You can build him to be a pure tank or a support tank if you want to lean into having higher fellowship scores. But you can also keep him very, very simple. You'll notice on his stats, he's going to have good boost to weapon skill. He's always going to be good with strength and toughness. Now, I do have some gear right now that's buffing this, but that's big. And then you can have his agility be buffed a little bit as well, mainly so you can get him acting early in initiative order. The rest of it can be, for the most part, dump stats for him. Now, as far as skill build-outs for him, I recommend building him as your athletics specialist. And you can also up Corrose for him. And that's mainly just so he resists negative debuffs like poison and fire, etc. And then his flagship post abilities is he makes swing one. By the end of the swing run, flagship can choose its position out of 3 directions instead of taking the opposite one. And this is an ability that lets you go straight and turn around on your ship. And shortcut is new heading cooldown is reduced by -1 round. And this basically makes it so that you have a bigger arc of movement on your ship. So he's a very basic character, but he can be your frontline tank. All right, now let's go ahead and take a look at a leveled up level 35 Abelard. Now again, I chose to build him with high toughness and strength and weapon skills. He's going to be specializing in big two-handed weapons. I chose not to lean into the fellowship kind of tanking route. Super high athletics. He's definitely my athletics check character, and really high corrose. Nothing else on him. Now, big things for him as far as for the warrior. The charge ability is amazing for extra movement and extra attacks, and he can really lean into that. And also, Daring Breach is a phenomenal heroic ability, especially early levels. Allows you to get extra movement, extra attacks, so multiple attacks within that round. And so really good at taking down priority targets especially. So arguably either the number 1 or number 2. I would probably say the second best of the tier 1 heroic abilities. Now, when it comes to the heroic ability from the Vanguard, which is what I recommend building him as, which is going to make him super, super tanky, it's not as great. I will say basically the really offensive heroic acts are going to be, should be prioritized, as it allows you to just, wipe enemies out. The best defense is a good offense in a lot of ways, and the best offense is an even better offense, in my opinion. Now, as far as passive talents, things that I think is really good for him to pick up, just basically anything that's going to make sure that he can move more, like swift movement is great for him. Maximizing his parry so that he doesn't get messed up in close combat. You can really leaning him into increasing critical hit chance by focusing on axes, hammers, or last weapons. In this case, I focus on the hammers. And you can also do more crit damage against bleeding enemies or once enemies are below 50% health. So these are just ways to get super high crit chance, which again, in melee, focusing on a single target or moving around and hitting multiple targets potentially, really, really strong suit for this character. Again, because he is Imperial, I highly recommend no heresy, increasing crit chance and armor against Xenos and demonic creatures. In this game, those will be probably the toughest creatures that you go against. For him, my overall review is that he unfortunately did not make my main group. I do find my main character happens to be a tank, but he is, of the main companions, probably the easiest character to build as a melee tank setup, especially since you get to choose what his second archetype is. As far as equipment, getting him the best heavy armor you can. I like that you get this early on, the deck officer's helmet. It's not a bad setup, an extra 5% armor. So I have 90% armor on him, which is amazing. You can get huge deflection on him. Get the best possible two-handed hammer you can on him. That's really, really good for smashing. There's also a variety of good one-handed swords out there. This is not a great one. This is just basic because again, I don't have them specialized. Anything that's going to increase his toughness or melee abilities is great. I have some gloves for him that increases strength, which is great. You get this mantle of heroism really early on. He is an iconoclast hero, and this makes it so you can actually get his dodge super, super high. So again, really, really good tank, very versatile. You can build him in a couple different ways to also be more tanky and supportive as well. Definitely an A character in my opinion. I like him quite a bit overall, but in my current playthrough, again, not so much. All right, next we have Cassia, and man, Cassia, she is one mean mama jamma. Again, I have a respect to minimum level 4. She may seem very, very basic at this form here, but she's an officer, and the officer class is focused on willpower and fellowships, and it's very, very supportive, and in my opinion, it is the most impactful potential archetype when played right to super power your main carry, your main damage dealer, which is probably going to be a sniper most likely, for example, or for AoE damage, maybe a psyker. You may superpower them as well. Her origin talents, she's a navigator. This may not seem like a big deal, but it is, because she's going to get access to some amazing navigator talents. Her unique element is Inspire Courage. Whenever she targets an ally with an ability for the first time around, they get temporary wounds, basically temporary hit points. And because this scales with willpower, and you're going to be able to easily get her willpower to 100, 120, 130, 140, this is amazing. Now, Finest Hour, unequivocally, in my opinion, is the best heroic ability. Just getting an extra turn for any character with no attack limits is absolutely amazing. You cast this on a sniper, for example, and you can make him snipe 5, sometimes 6, 7, 8, 9 times in a row, maybe 10, and wipe out 3/4 of a map sometimes. Super amazing, super impactful. You'll get this right off the bat. Very, very good. Her flagship abilities is Spin Around, and she also has Leaking Aether. Enemy void chips suffer 25 to 34% of their maximum hull integrity warp damage when being jumped through using shallow jump, which is basically a forward jump. So you can turn this into an offensive ability. And determined scan during vulnerability scan. Weak point never appears at the opposite side of an enemy void ship. Her ability, bring it down, that you can use every round, is gonna give an extra turn, quote unquote, where you cannot move, but it's going to allow you to have that enemy or that ally do 2 action points of an attack. Super, super good. Voice of command, super powerful, where it's going to increase all the characteristics of characters for a round. And then she does get origin talent. She's gonna get a psychic attack. Right off the bat, she has a huge impact on characters. She is, in most parties, gonna be a pivotal role, especially when you level her up. Must add to just about any group. And for her skills and characteristics relating to fellowship, willpower, I pumped some perception for certain skills. And then for me, she was my persuasion person. She's going to be your talker. All right. And now here we have Cassia at level 36. And I will say, if you think she's powerful early game, just wait till you get her to later in the game. I do like using her as a grand strategist. In a nutshell, this is a very kind of complex compared to most other archetypes setup. But the most beautiful thing about being a grand strategist is you always get to go first, which is big. You can set these kind of areas, the back line, the rear, the front line. It'll provide various buffs. But for her, you're going to get the most out of her by really leaning into her origin talents and officer talents as well. So early on, she's going to be able to give people extra turns with range attacks. But then you can make it so that you can cleanse debuffs. You can give temporary health to characters. Of course, the buff to give a character plus 23, in this case, to all characteristics, keeps getting stronger and stronger. You can make it so you can permanently increase the resolve that characters get. You want to spread this as much as you can. This means you're going to be able to use heroic abilities more and more often. But really what makes her different, because you could become an officer as your main character, but what makes her so good are her origin talents that she gets. And really, Reveal the Light is so OP. The way I have it right now over willpower, and it will scale even more, is plus 32 to willpower and toughness. You put this on your psychers, and all of a sudden, their willpower goes through the roof, and they're just melting things, their psychic abilities. This is what makes her. I basically never use Lidless Stare. I cast this on everybody that wants to be more tanky and use willpower offensively or defensively. Now, what's also amazing when you level up, your finest hour, which I mentioned, is already probably the best possible heroic power. You can upgrade it. So during a turn, enemies do even more damage. And then afterwards, until the end of combat, the target gains the effect of Voice of Command, which is that big plus all characteristics boost that normally only lasts for a turn and then goes on cooldown. And I love this one as well, because during the extra turn, any kill made by the target restores 1 AP and 1 AP up to 9 times. Why is this huge? Because you can cast Finest Hour on a sniper, and literally you can do 1 shot, 1 kill on the majority of enemies. And this is how you can get up to 9 extra APs, where at that point, your biggest enemy is running out of bullets, not running out of AP. So ridiculously powerful. Focus is also great as well. Allows you to basically boost perception and ballistic skills whenever you boost abilities. And you're going to have about a 3/4 damage, or 3/4 amount, not damage, of origin talents that are just so powerful. Whenever you're casting navigator skills, you're going to buff your willpower. As you can see here, you can lower veil degradation, so you can cast more basically spells or psychic powers without having negative effects. You can basically make it that you can use your perception instead of agility for dodge. This is how I have 135% dodge on her. So you can also make it so that you can buff people's armor when you use navigator abilities. I mean, just a ton of things, buffing everybody's resistances. As you can see here, it's just so powerful. You can make it so that you heal automatically at the beginning of every turn, and this gets more and more powerful as well. It's just amazing. You can make it so that if you do, you can make it so that allies suffer less damage and resistances if they were to be in the path of one of your offensive abilities, which is amazing as well. And then basically anybody that she sees, their dodge and hit chance gets lowered by a huge amount. Here it's already 14 baseline. It's just so good. Here's other ways to buff her fellowship, which again is going to feed into other effects. Just absolutely amazing. And of course, you want to make sure you master her persuasion. Take a look, 207 persuasion, just absolutely nuts. And also super resilient to everything. When it comes to her gear, a big thing for her is just, again, if you lean into her strength, you're going to make her unstoppable. Using staffs that will basically, since you're mainly using buffs, that will buff characteristics of anybody you target is huge. There's a variety of items that will increase your fellowships. And see here, you can buff your allies' crit hit chance by your fel bonus. Armor, again, just the best that you can get of light armor. And this ring is amazing. You can just, once a combat, just get plus 20 momentum. That's the main thing you get, but also more persuasion skill. Here's more willpower, and then more fellowship because she is a dogmatic individual. More persuasion, more fellowship bonuses, and more dodge bonuses. So again, so incredibly impactful. She will not only be godly herself, but she's going to make everybody else and anybody she specializes her buffs on super godly, million attacks, must have in just about any party. All right, guys, finally we have Pasqual, and he is the first truly unique character companion that you're going to get. Everybody else was still, they had special abilities, but in many ways they were very humanoid and very normal. This character, not only is he your second operative, but he's part human, part machine. And that's going to give him some very unique features. Now, he does have Melta weapon proficiency, Plasma weapon proficiency, Bolter weapon proficiency, but then he has part machine. So he's going to get +1 deflection, 10% armor, and suffers -5% to dodge right off the bat. His two abilities he gets for flagship are Torpedo Reload. Expeditious Reload can now be used during accelerated phase to reload torpedo tubes fired the previous round. And Perfect Pulse, which will give Shield Pulse 1 extra range and doesn't expand the flagship shields. Now, as an operative, he gets to take advantage of Analyze Enemies, which will, again, make him really good at focusing down single targets, or even later on multi-targets as well. He does have Dismantling Attack even at lower levels because, again, it's not level 2 but level 4. But I will point out that, again, Dismantling Attack is not my favorite. I absolutely never use this heroic ability. And Passive Learning is nice to start out as well for getting extra exploits. Now, if we look at his equipment options, you're going to see the other element that's unique to him. So he, for example, has only one equipment setup, but he can wield a two-handed weapon that is melee and a two-handed ranged weapon at the same time. I have him use a Melta, but he can make an excellent sniper as well. That's probably how most people will probably use him early on, as a sniper. So he doesn't have to swap weapons, and he can kind of just wage in and be melee or range as you need him. His armor that he starts with is very unique. It basically increases in armor percentage based on your logic scaling. And also you get a boost to your tech use. Not surprisingly, he's going to be your tech use monkey here. And also having probably the highest logic of your group. You can choose to have him specialize in the lore if you like as well. But these two are the big ones I tend to specialize him in. Tech use and logic. Now, skill-wise, he can definitely have good weapon skill and ballistic skills to kind of multi-specialize, or you could just abandon melee and just make him your main sniper, to be honest with you. Because before you get your other Xenos option that's coming, he's definitely going to be the best built for sniping. And then his other stats are all elevated just a little bit. A little toughness, a little agility, strength, intelligence. Now his perception is surprisingly only 30. Again, based on his archetype, you'd probably want to get perception higher, but this is a class that will probably lean into having really high intelligence, ballistic skills, and perception naturally, in my opinion. Early on, if you make him a sniper, he can be your damage carry at low levels, while still being able to take a hit potentially and be semi-dodgy. But now let's go ahead and take a look what he looks like at higher level. All right, finally, let's take a look and review Pasqual at higher levels. Here he is at level 35. Pasqual, I made him a bounty hunter in my setup. I think that's a really good option for him. And he can quite literally be your Swiss Army knife, both figuratively and physically as well. Now, I want to point out that in my setup, I made it so that he could be really good at ranged, but also still leaned into the weapon skills and the melee attacks. You can definitely make him a pure sniper if you wanted. And again, very importantly to me, he's the only character that had high logic and tech use for a long time. So if you need somebody, because those tech checks are so important in this game, especially, that is going to lean into tech use, this is the perfect character for you. Make him your sniper, make him one of your DPS carries, and he'll be very, very good, to be honest with you. Now, when it comes to talents, I want to point out one talent in particular that I should have mentioned at low level because you get it right away, is Machine Spirit Communion. This has got a huge AoE, and basically, when it targets allies, it's going to make it so you have less recoil, which is great. And also, you're going to penalize dodge on enemies you hit, and does the opposite for enemies. So enemies that have burst attacks are going to be all over the place, and your burst attacks are going to be more focused and more accurate. So this is a really cool kind of ability that you can utilize situationally. Now, let me show you kind of my equipment for this, how I have this character, because I no longer have him in my group as an active character, but right before that happened, I did mess around with making him a Melta character, so a close-ranged, armor-penetrating AoE build, because his defense was pretty darn decent as well. Went a little bit away from the sniper route, so you can definitely have him be really good at that, because if somebody gets right in melee with him as well, not a problem. Smash him with one of your Omniscient Axes as an alternative. Getting buffs that will increase your lores, hit chance. You know, obviously get this is not by any means the even close to great medium armor, but that's what I had on him. But buffing your logic, buffing your tech use, really, really huge on different equipment here. If you can get his int high, and again, I have it 60 now, and in combat, it pushes, I think, 100 once he's buffed. This will let you up everybody's dodge with this great amulet. Again, he's a really good candidate for having high intelligence, and multiple ways to increase your dodge even more. So how do I rank him? Well, if you kind of make him this jack of all trades, this army knife setup, Swiss Army knife setup, he can be that ranged character that is not going to be in the biggest world of trouble if somebody gets in melee with him. And also very versatile with how he can support your team with different skill checks, etc. But are there better pure melees? Are there better pure snipers? Yes, there are. But if you don't have anybody else to do your tech checks and logic checks, he's going to be a real natural addition to your team. All right, guys, that ends my review of the first 5 characters. I'll be doing another video going over the following next 5 companions, and they get even wilder, even crazier, so make sure to check out that video. I will be making a single character guide videos later on with combat footage, etc. But I wanted to give my initial feedback on these first 10 companions that I'll be featuring in these videos. It's not a perfect system. If you guys want to give me some feedback on how to optimize the videos in the future, do let me know and drop a like and subscribe. As always, thank you for your support, and I'll see you in the next video.